Hi, I'm a victim of human trafficking. I am Eritrean, and my story starts in 2012, March, when I decided to leave Eritrea because I couldn't continue to survive there. I fled the regime and went to Sudan and made it safely to the refugee camp called Shagarab near Kassala. Unfortunately, a couple of weeks later, I was kidnapped along with two other refugees, Eritrean refugees, and were chained up and brought to North Sudan.
Can you tell me your name?
Filmon.
You have gone to school, educated?
To some extent, yes. Till my third year in college.
In Eritrea?
Yes, in Eritrea.
For the first, where did you grow up?
I was born in Sudan and I grew up there till I was 12, and then my family moved back home to Eritrea. I've been living in Eritrea till March 2012.
So you went to high school in Sawa and everything?
Yeah, I went to high school in Asmara. After that I went to Sawa with the 18th round. I had my matriculation exam in Sawa, and after that, after 4 months of work, just summer work, I was allowed to go into college.
So you had good points?
Yes, basically.
And what did you study?
Computer related, IT stuff, because that was the only acceptable field for me.
So how many years did you study?
About 3 years. About 3 years. But even though it was a few years, I can't really say that I was in that college in spirit, because it didn't turn out to be like I hoped it would be. It didn't turn out to be like I imagined it to be, because it was more like a military school than a college. And I don't know, in college it's where you're supposed to express your ideas, to generate new ideas, and to better yourself, to better your fellow man, but not in this college, not in my Nafhi, no way. Especially when students were arrested for refusing to participate in a carnival. That was the low of my Nafhi, because these students were like me. These students who went to Sawa before, came to college, did all their dues, but just because they belong to a religious minority and they refused to participate in a public dance which their religion prohibited, they were arrested. That's it, simply taken and arrested. And that's the thing back home. People get arrested, they never get to see the courts. That's it. If by some miracle you have a relative who is a colonel or a general, maybe the punishment could be a bit lenient and you might have a way of getting out, but unless you've got that, then that's it. You're done. This religious minority, they were arrested. They had the option of signing a form that says that they were wrong to dance, to renounce their faith, and to just simply incriminate themselves in something they were not guilty of. They were told that was the only way to get out of the prison. Some very few took that opportunity to get out. They renounced their faith, they signed the form, and they got out. But most refused, and they are still in prison. some of my colleagues, and well, I started to work after that.
What year? What year was that?
Yeah, by the end of, beginning 2009, 2009. So I started to work in Asmara because, for one, I saw my time in college, especially in this college, as wasted time that I couldn't get back now, because it was just simply a waste of time. You don't get credit, you don't get international accreditation, and you certainly don't get your diploma or your degree by the end of your 4-year or 5-year term. So all in all, staying there was a lose-lose situation. So I left school and I started to work just in general IT, fixing general electronics, computers, and later on smartphones. And another reason was my family's financial situation was getting worse and worse, and I had to help out.
So you were released from the army, from the school?
No, I was not. I was definitely not. Nobody gets released from that. That is, unless you have someone high up in the government officials, then you get released without doing anything. That's the funny part. But for someone like me, someone who is a nobody, it's impossible to be released. So it wasn't an option for me to serve this, I cannot even say government really, more like thugs, those crime syndicate. I refuse to serve my youth. I refuse to waste my years serving these thugs, and I decided to work and at least help out my family for a little bit. And as it turned out, fixing electronic stuff is kind of has good money back home in Asmara, especially. More so after smartphones were introduced. So at least money-wise, it was okay, it was good. But I was still afraid that one day they will catch up with me, and they will catch me because I didn't have a pass, because everybody in Eritrea has to have a pass in order to live, because the military police could just simply apprehend anyone on the street and demand to see their paper, and unless they have the right paper, they're simply imprisoned. And I didn't have any paper. I just recognized the pattern in which the MPs would ask people on the street. The MPs would come knocking at your door at home, and they would search your place, and I kind of learned the pattern they used, and using that I managed to elude them for 3 years. But I knew sooner or later that I was going to get caught. So after 3 years, I felt like the noose was getting tighter and tighter, and I decided to get out. And including me, 4 people started our journey to get out of Eritrea. And near Sawa, we found 2 people that wanted to get out but didn't have the means or know how to do it, so we took them with us. And by this point there were 6 of us, 1 woman, 5 men, and it took us 3 days and 3 nights to go to get to Kasala, actually near Kasala. um, I know that there was kidnappings that were an occurrence of kidnappings along the border between Eritrea and Sudan, but we took every precaution that we can think of. I was trying to get a firearm, some sort of rifle or a pistol to, just defend myself in case, but I failed. I couldn't get that. So luckily I had a sword. We had a sword back home, so I sharpened that one and took that one, just thinking that it would be better than nothing. And actually that sword kind of saved our lives, because just a few hours from Kassala we were almost kidnapped. A Toyota pickup with about 8 Rashidas came to the very tree that we were sleeping under, because we would walk all night and rest all day. So they came and they offered to take us to the refugee camp for £200. We said no. They said, how about £100? We said no. Then they said, oh, we're going there, we might as well take you for free. We said no, thank you. And we knew they were trying to trick us, and the only reason they did not use force altogether was because there were 5 of us and we were rested and refreshed, because we were taking it slow. So some of them tried to push us and we pushed back, and that's when they realized that we weren't going to give in to their demand willingly. And we had a little help from one of the local people over there that, he was running toward us, and this guys kind of gave up, I think, and they got into their pickup and left. And this guy, I think he belongs to the ethnic group Hadandawa. He came over and he said, thank God you did not get on that pickup, because these people are monsters. What they do to human beings is horrible. Just don't, under any circumstances, get on their pickups. And we said we knew that. Even while he was saying this, we couldn't trust him, because we were kind of paranoid at this point. We couldn't trust anyone except someone within our group. And he advised us to come with him to his place so that he would call the cops. But even though we couldn't trust him, we decided to just walk and try to run toward Kassala. But he warned us that the Rashida are going to come back. They were not going to let us go. And true to his word, just a few minutes later, we saw this huge, cloud of dust and sand, behind us, and then we could see a few Toyota pickups. It was obvious that they were coming back with more men and more rifles, just to overpower us. And that's when we decided to go with the local guy, and he took us to his place, and he called the police, and the police came and took us to Kassala. At least in that part we succeeded in eluding the Rashidas. Partly because we fought them off, and partly because there weren't that many of them. There were 6 of us, and there were 8 of them. And even though we didn't have much of a weapon, the sword itself had a good help too. And since the sword was going to be confiscated by the cops in Kassala, I gave it to the local guy as a gift, because he did save our lives that day. After a couple of days in the station in Kassala, they took us to the refugee camp in Shagarab. And
what year was that?
It is still March 2012. the idea was to stay in that refugee camp for a month and a half, to get the refugee card, and then move on to the capital. But the only reason I had to suffer in that camp was because without that refugee card, if you're caught in Sudan, you could end up being deported to Eritrea, and that's the last thing I wanted. And from there, I stayed there for a week or two, and then one morning, 5 a.m., I was kidnapped along with 2 other refugees like me.
How did it come to be?
We were supposed to collect firewood in order to cook our own food because we weren't supplied with already prepared food or canned food. We just had the option of flour and to buy some other stuff, and for the source of heat we had to build our own fire out of firewood and stuff like that. So every morning we took it in turn to go and collect firewood, and this fateful morning I went there with 6, all in all there were 6 of us, and out of nowhere 3 Toyota pickups filled with Ashidas showed up, and they started chasing us, and luckily for the other 3 they were a little closer to the place we slept. So they managed to run away because the Rashidas were focused on the other 3 that were nearer to them. So they chased us, even though I could have outrun the ones on foot, and it can be really fast sometimes. And but the driver of the pickup would come rushing just parallel to me, and then he would turn the wheel suddenly and bump me on the side, and I would end up falling on the sand, and before I could get up, the others would come and they'd start to beat me up, and then I would spring free, start to run again. Again, the driver would come and bump me to the ground, and that happened about 5 times, and after that I was completely out of breath. I couldn't breathe. So they dumped me on the back of the truck, and they sat on me so that I could not jump out of the truck. We were taken to somewhere north of that location, somewhere isolated, and we were joined by other refugees that were kidnapped like us, and we stayed there for a few days, and after that we started our journey to Egypt, because that's the only option they give you. They keep beating you up till you just tell the dealer that you are willing, because that's the only option. You either do that or die. And I even tried to convince the Rashidas that I was Sudanese so that they would release me there. Since I spoke Arabic, I was hoping that that would happen. I even told them that if it's money they want, I'll ask my family, and then my family would pay them the money here in Sudan. Just let me go here. Don't take me to Egypt. I don't want to go to Israel. I don't want to go anywhere. Just let me go here. Just my family will pay you the money that you're going to get from the Bedouins that you're going to sell me to. Just let me go here, and you'll get the money anyway. So, but they wouldn't listen. You cannot reason with those people.
The Rashidas.
Yes. And regardless of what we said, we were piled up on a pickup truck, and we were sent to the north, to Egypt. And from the border, they used boats to transport us across the Nile toward Aswan. From there again, they used pickups to transport us to some rocky mountainous area to the maybe northeast of Aswan. And from there they used poultry truck that was somehow camouflaged with a false roof to transport us across the Suez Canal into the Sinai Peninsula.
There was no searching.
No searching. We tried to scream when they put us in the truck, hoping that we knew we were about to cross the Suez Canal. So I advised all of them to scream, just to for the chance that some soldier might hear us, some cop. But it turned out the driver just the truck was completely blocked. It had a false roof and some sort of space that was not that much high. You could not sit straight, and it wasn't that high enough. He took us to even remote area before we crossed the Suez Canal, and he warned us not to scream, or else he was simply going to leave us in the desert for 3 days, and once we die, he's going to dump us there and take the next shipment of kidnapped people from the Aswan area.
How many were you?
About 150, 130, maybe, I'm not sure on the number exactly. So it was really hard to breathe in that truck, and since we couldn't really know when we were on the Suez Canal, we started to keep quiet. We decided to keep quiet, partly because of his warning, and partly because we were running out of oxygen, and the more we screamed, the more likely chance of our survival. So we decided to keep quiet, and as soon as we got to Sinai, they separated us into groups, and they took us to this first camp. My initial group were separated. We were dispersed among the smugglers, and I ended up with 12 of my. It was 12, yeah. 3 of them from a different group, and the rest were from my original group. So the 12 of us were sent to this first camp, and the first day we were beaten up harshly, and they asked for $3,500, and they made us call home so that our families would know. Then they would start to pay the money, and as soon as you dial and someone picks up on the other side, they will start to beat you up, just beat you up mercilessly. They were thinking, in their case, they were thinking that if our parents hear us screaming on the phone, they might pay up faster. But we told them that we don't have wealthy families. We don't. Our families could not even, on their own, couldn't even get like $300. But they wouldn't listen. They didn't care. So you just said either get that money or you die.
Are they Arabs?
The Bedouins are, yeah, pretty much Arabs.
How many were they?
Where?
Who were torturing, beating you?
In the first camp, there were they took turns, and they were about maybe 15, 12. 15, 12, yeah. They came and went. Sometimes they changed shifts. But yeah. So that's yeah, that's where they broke my wrist, my right wrist, actually, in the first camp. And after 2 weeks, my sister managed to get the money from friends and relatives. She obviously could. She obviously couldn't get it from home, um, and she sent them the money. And along with my group, they then moved me to another camp where another smuggler. And this guy sat us down and he said, I paid a lot of money to get you, and so I'm expecting a lot of money from you. And he said we were going to either pay $30,000 or that's it. um, yeah, from day one, both my feet were chained up, and my right foot would be chained up with the left foot to the guy that's next to me, and it kept going like that. And since the chain on my right foot was so tight, it started digging into my flesh. I had a kind of blood poisoning or something because my vision was getting poorer and poorer. I couldn't stand on my own by the time I got to the second camp. And when they said $30,000, I just gave up. I knew that my family could never get $30,000, could never make it on their own, and I really didn't think that $30,000 could be collected. And the pain, the torture was continuous, day in, day out. And what's more, that really made me hate myself was what my family was going through. I was really worried about my mom. Because if anything had happened to her, I didn't know what was going to happen to my siblings, my four my younger brothers and sisters. So I tried to put myself in her place. It would drive her crazy, listening to her eldest son screaming on the other side of the phone, asking for money, and no way to help him out because you don't have any. That would drive any human crazy, and I was really worried about that. And I thought, instead of this elongated nightmare, maybe if I take my own life, it just would stop. My family would mourn me, and then they would move on, because this was going nowhere. These people kept torturing us. They kept making us call home. And our families were getting desperate, begging anyone to help them on the street. And it's very hard to get 30 times. Wow, it's not just borderline impossible, but so I tried to take my own life. There was a piece of wire that I took off from the first camp, because the makeshift hut that we were in was kind of a string of haze that was tied together with wires. I managed to untie one of them without the guards looking, and I tried to use that to, cut off my jugular, and since the wire was old and rusty, it didn't work. It kept breaking. I just couldn't break my skin. And as a second option, I asked one of the translators. There were some kidnapped refugees like us, who were forced to be translators in Sinai. And there was this one guy in that second camp, and I asked him to get me any kind of poison, any poison that he can think of, or get his hands on. But that guy refused. He said he doesn't want to do anything that's going to, result in my death. So He refused to get me the poison. So that was my second attempt, and after that I didn't get a chance. I was hoping though that one of the guards that were guarding us, because obviously all of them were armed and they had rifles and pistols, I was really hoping one of them would come into that small hut. As they torture us, they always come in, but they always come in unarmed because they have experience in this matter, experience in holding people. And I think they knew if we're desperate enough that we might do damage to them and us at the same time, because I was really hoping one of them would come in, overpower him and use the gun on him and save the last bullet for myself. I was really hoping for that. Take as many of them with me and that's it, take my own life. But it didn't work out. They're always careful. They're very, very careful. They had experience of that for at least 3 years, I guess. So the torture continued. Part of it was where they pour molten plastic on your back, on your hand. They would beat your hand with a stick, with a whip, didn't matter, whatever came to hand. People were dying, they were dropping like flies. In the second camp, it was a camp that was comprised of a number of small huts, and whenever one of the torturer would come in, they would open the door and you'd see a glimpse of the internal compound, and every once in a while you see dead bodies that were wrapped with blankets being carried out of the camp every day. And I don't think I was alone in wanting to die, because many were trying to. And I remember this girl in the second hut right next to us. I never saw her face. I couldn't see anyone except those 12 that were with me, but I could hear their voice. And part of the torture was they would use electricity to electrocute us. And somehow they left the wire unattended within the hut, and this girl saw her opportunity and she jumped on it and grabbed the wire. But thing is, since all of them were chained together, once she grabbed the wire, all of them were electrocuted. About 18 people in the second hut. But before they could die, once they heard the thrashing, because they started banging, and they cut off the power from outside, and they came in. None of them died, but the girl that originally held the wire, she was in a bad condition. But that's the thing, they kept beating her up. I could hear her screams even then. It would have been much, much more merciful if she had died holding that wire. So that was pretty much what went on in those torture camps, day in, day out. We didn't have much food. We had like a single bread a day and about a cup full of crushed beans in 3 people for the whole day. It's just one bite. We were starved, so weak, we could barely move. At that point, even if they had intentionally released us, I don't think we could have gone more than 50 or 100 meters from that camp. We were so weak. But one day my mom calls and says they had managed to collect the $30,000. For me, it was impossible. I did not believe her. I thought she was trying to, boost my morale by just giving me false hope. But it turned out they did collect $30,000 from friends all over the world, relatives, even just simple acquaintances, that people I wasn't even close to, even some strangers that pitched in to help out with the money, um, and my family borrowed from some people, promising to pay that money back, and but I was so weak. I informed my family that unless they hear my voice, they should never pay a single cent, because I really thought that I was going to die any of those days. And but they paid the traffickers, and they sent me to another guy and another Badawi, that was the actual person that was responsible for the crossing of the border from Egypt to Israel. And like I said, I couldn't walk, I couldn't even stand, let alone walk, forget running. This guy advised me to stay with him for at least 2 weeks to get stronger, but I refused. I said no, because my situation was getting worse and worse, and the damage to my hands was already done.
Was damaged?
Because part of the torture was they would hang you up from the ceiling, sometimes right side up, sometimes upside down, and during a very intensive torture period, they hang me up for about 3 days, tying me up from my wrists and hang me up from the ceiling. Initially I had little support because I could reach the surface of the sand with my toes, but one of the torturers came in with a shovel and he dug up the space directly beneath my feet, and I ended up dangling in the air, and the whole weight of my body was focused on my wrists. And by the end of the 3rd day, I couldn't feel both my hands. It turned out the chain, it held so tight that it blocked the blood flow from my arm to my hand. So like any tissue without blood flow, my hands started to die, and my flesh was dripping from my hands. Literally, it was dripping. And by the time I was released, I could see the bone of my pinky finger, the entire bone. It was horrible, it was surreal actually, but by this point I was more unconscious than conscious. So when they sent me to the third smuggler, I was just asking him to send me to any hospital. I told him staying with him was not an option. He was kinder than the previous, traffickers that I met. He did not torture or anything, it turned out. So, lucky for me, there are about 150 refugees that were ready to cross the border, and they divided into groups of 5, and they took turns to carry me over to the Israeli side. Even though at some points I actually begged them to let me go, I did not want them to die for me, because it was dangerous enough to cross the border on your own 2 feet, let alone dragging someone else with you. But they refused to listen to me, and they carried me over to Israel. And as soon as the Israeli soldiers met us, they separated me from the rest of the group, and they sent me to hospital in the Soroka hospital in Beersheba. And they took the rest of the people that came in with me directly toward prison, I think, because by that time the anti-infiltration law was passed by the Israeli parliament, and it meant that any African asylum seeker or refugee that tries to cross to Israel will be held for at least 3 years, slash indefinitely, just because he crossed the border. And those people that were with me, and their only crime being refugees, their only crime being victims of human trafficking, they ended up being imprisoned in Israel for 3 years at least, because I never saw any of them again. I never saw those people that carried me over to Israel. I never managed to talk to them, because I spent the next 3 months in the hospital, and after that I had about 7 surgeries in the hospital. My life was saved, but then I was informed that the next advanced surgeries are going to cost a lot of money, and since the Israeli government does not cover, that kind of health for refugees like us. Actually, we were not called refugees in Israel, we were called infiltrators or migrants, which is crazy to think of. So I was informed that I had no coverage or any of kind of help to get the surgeries that I need to help with my hands. So I was taken to a shelter in Petah Tikva, and I stayed there for the year after that. Well, after that, I had an invitation to talk in the European Parliament in Brussels in December 4, 2013, and I accepted the invitation. I came over and I gave my testimony in the Parliament, and after that, I refused to go back to Israel because Israel is not an option as a refugee. So I came over to Sweden.
So how long were you in Sinai?
3 months.
From March?
March 2012 till June 2012.
And which camp were you in?
Which what?
Camp. Torturing camp.
Yeah, that's the thing. In our case, it was strange. Nobody seems to know the people we were in. Sometimes they say they are from the Abdullah guy. Sometimes they give Abu Saif or something. So they kept giving different names every day. So yeah, I really can't say which camp I was in.
And some of the torturers or translators were Eritreans or Habashas.
Mm-hmm. True.
Which one were in your camp?
There was one who was in the first camp. There was an Eritrean. Even in the next camp, there was an Eritrean translator.
And those translators, they speak good Arabic.
Yeah, they do speak Arabic. Most of them, it's not like they want to do it. It's just that, just like me, they would get kidnapped and they get brought to Sinai. And if for any reason that specific owner of the camp or smuggler doesn't have a translator, he would just force these people to stay with him and translate. Regardless if their family pay or not, he would just force them to stay there and translate. And with time, some of them, I think it is a side effect of being kidnapped and forced to translate and forced to watch people being tortured. I think some of them snap, and it turns out for the worse, because some of them even participate in the torture of their fellow countrymen as well. I don't think they're well on the head. I don't think they were well in the head then. But most, they just simply translate and that's it. Sometimes in some camps they would ask the translator to beat a specific refugee, and some would refuse, and some at gunpoint would have to do it. Some even are asked to rape the female kidnappees too. Like I said, some would refuse, and some at gunpoint would have to do it in order to save their own lives.
Yes, I could understand that, but some of them did so even after the Arabs were gone.
True. Yes. Yeah, I can't explain why those very few did that, but they did it. We have to make them sit down and ask them, investigate to really know why they did it. Was it they're naturally evil, or just they got messed up on that desert? I don't know.
But you spoke Arabic.
I did, but both camps that we were in, they had their own translators, so they didn't really need my translation. And thankfully, I wasn't held there, to translate for longer. In some cases, knowing the Arabic, understanding the Arabic language did not help me, because sometimes the smugglers themselves would fight among themselves and start shouting, insulting each other, and then when they come in, they would say, "Yeah, this guy was listening to us. He understands," and they would start to beat me up more than my fair share of torture just because I understood Arabic.
But you did not intend to go to Israel.
No, let alone crossing the desert. If I had an option to board a plane in Khartoum and then go to Israel, I would never have done so. I never had any intention to go to Europe. I never had intention to go to the States. My kind of skills, my kind of profession are in great demand in Africa right now. Sudan and Angola especially. And these were my two designated destinations. Like I said, I had no intention of coming here originally, because I could live a comfortable life there, and get my family out, and that's it. But things did not work out as I planned. I ended up being kidnapped, tortured, got into Israel, which is the last place I wanted to go originally, even before I saw the way they treated the refugees in Israel. After that, I had to go to a developed country in order to get medical help for my hand, because after the damage to my hands, some of the African countries were really not an option anymore because of the damage to my hands. I needed more advanced surgeries, and that's why when I came to Europe, I came directly to Sweden in the hope that with their policy, it's really good for someone like me, a refugee, especially a refugee that needs help, medical help, because medical help is covered by the government. Just only trouble is my original visa was to Belgium, Brussels, and due to the Dublin Convention, people are supposed to seek asylum wherever they got into Europe first, especially the Schengen area. And I was informed that there was a possibility that I might be sent back to Belgium, but I'm trying to fight it and get a permanent residence here in Sweden.
Yes, I hope so. You have any contact with your family?
I do, but all the calls are restricted to hi's and how are yous, and that's it. You can't talk about something serious on the phone because most phones back home are tapped. So.
And for all your suffering, who do you think is first to blame?
The regime back home, the regime that's calling itself the democratic government of Eritrea. No, That's the one I blame more than the Bedouins, more than the Rashidas. I blame the Eritrean regime.
There are some people who still don't believe that this happens in Sinai.
Yeah, well, you can't force anyone to believe, but if someone denies all, the human trafficking cycle that exists from Sudan to Egypt, with all the evidence that's available today, with all the testimonies of victims of human trafficking coming out and speaking out, then that person could either be, well, an idiot or trying to feign deliberate ignorance. Yeah.
Do you still have post-traumatic problems?
Well, I do get nightmares, but they get less and less now. They were intensive during my my time in the hospital, and since I couldn't sleep at all after I got to the hospital, I had a hard time sleeping. They tried two kind of pills, didn't work out, and then they had to give me some sort of narcotic drug just to get me to sleep, and it did get me to sleep, but at the same time it kind of induced nightmares. It was horrible in the hospital, really horrible. Well, especially since most of the nurses could not speak English or Arabic. They either spoke Hebrew or Russian. Only the doctors, the doctors spoke English, and I just got to speak to the doctors just in the morning. The rest of the day I had to point and grunt, and I had to use sign just to help communicate with the nurses, and having no fingers didn't help, not even with a signal. But it's getting less and less now. The nightmares are getting less and less.
Did you get any therapy for it?
No, I did not. In Israel, is like I said, did not treat it as a refugee. You're treated as some sort of infiltrator or something. And there is no integrational system or a system that helps, victims of human trafficking or people with, trauma in the past. It's just you either have to be, being Black African and non-Jewish didn't help too. It did not help. Yeah, you have to be Jewish to get those kind of help.
But they knew what you went through. The government knew.
Of course they know.
They knew what suffering is.
Yes, they knew. Of course, this is not. It's not a secret, really, because the Bedouins themselves actually sometimes post footage of what they were doing in YouTube. It's not a big secret, like I said. The government of Egypt was denying the existence of this cycle till recently. And when there was overwhelming evidence and proof that it exists, they said they were powerless to stop it, blah blah blah, the usual excuses. And it's not a simple thing to ignore or to just not to know about, because the convoys of trucks that held refugees, kidnappees, they went through checkpoints. To go through checkpoints, you have to have some corrupt officials that collaborated with those traffickers. It cannot be done otherwise. It could never be done.
In Egypt?
In Egypt, yes. Even in Sudan, there were some corrupt officials too. Because my friend Daniel was taken from the police station. He thought he was safe. He got to the police station, and one of the cops called the Rashidas, and they sold him to the Rashidas from the police station. So.
It was a short interview, but thank you very much for telling me.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
I was contacted by a family member of an hostage that told me this is happening in Sinai, even though I knew about it, but I've never spoke to Sinai hostages. So he gave me the number to call and to talk to them. So I called. I was touched. So since I work for a radio station, then I asked if it's okay for me that I interview them. So they let me, and from there it led to so many other interviews. So I've been collecting interviews for the past 2 years. These people are being held hostage in Sinai, and they are shackled to each other. There's chains in their feet, chains in their hands. So the only thing the Bedouins that are holding them, they give them 3 mobile phones. They tell them, call your relatives everywhere in the world and ask for money. So they get tortured while they are talking to me. So those interviews are recorded as they are being held hostage, as they are being tortured and raped, and some people they die, so I have to be the one to call their families in Eritrea and to notify the families, oh, your son died in Sinai, which I've never met, I've never seen the days, but I just know because I have to let them know so that they don't send them money for the Bedouins thinking that their son is alive or their daughter is alive. So this is the kind of interviews that I do.
The torture that is done to extort the money is really excessive and just really beyond imagination, and that many people die in captivity. So the threat of dying is very real, which is why people are very stressed when they speak to relatives on the phone and being under extreme hardship. Which is also why the money is paid, because if you hear that on the other end you're not going to let your nephew or your cousin or your daughter or son stay in that way. 95% of the people in Sinai originate from Eritrea, which is a country that has been on the bottom list of the Freedom House Index for the last 5 years. So people have a lot of reason to flee that country, but people are also very scared to be deported back to the country. And in a way, the lack of alternatives is also creating that pressure that people pay for them to be released. But then they still cannot go anywhere, because if they go to Cairo or if they go to Israel, they are still deported back to Eritrea, where also they are then locked up because they would have illegally left the country, because you cannot in a legal way leave the country.
This place has to speak a lot, has to shout for the people who are voiceless.
The first time you overheard the first evidence?
I couldn't believe. I thought they were making up in order to sympathize with them. But then it repeats, and you see also on their bodies tortured. Then you say, yeah, it is true. You have to believe.
How many people did you meet who told you this story?
More than 300 people, and we are still continuing.
While we are speaking, there are people there now?
Actually, yesterday I received that 150 were prisoners and they were taken from one place to another. The world is silence, and the silence, they have to break the silence of the world. Nobody is taking steps, and this is what makes me sad.